Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mirz Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Nun Tes Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos, and we pick up today on the very bottom line of Daf Nun Tes Amid Aleph, Siman Reish Ayin Tes, in the midst of Sif Beis, right by the words of the Ramah on the bottom line. Haga. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Beis Yisrael Hanasunim Batzara Ubashivya Haimdim Meim Bayam Ubeim Bayabasha Hamakim Merachem Aleihem V'Yitziim Yitzara L'Rvacha Be'Afela L'Oira Mishibed L'Geula Hashta B'Agala V'Zman Kariv V'Neimar Amen. Our learning should be a schus Refuah Shalema for Tzvi ben Leah Miriam and for Daniel ben Naomi. Our learning should also be a schus for Yisrael ben Rachel, Yonasan ben Michal, Yoel ben Michal. The Rosh Hashanah should watch over them, together with all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. B'chol Makom Shehem. Okay, so here in Siman Reish Ayin Tes, we've been discussing a halacha of basis ledavar ha'aser. The topic of this siman was Dine Tiltal Haner b'Shabbos. You light neris on Erev Shabbos. You're not allowed to handle those neris. You're not allowed to move the candlesticks even after the neros go out. Why not? Because of the halacha of basis ledavar ha'aser. When you light neris, doesn't matter if you have candles, it doesn't matter if you use oil. Whenever you light neris, you are lighting a ner, a flame, on the very top of that neros construction. So you have a flame. The flame is muktzah. Now the flame is on a wick. The wick is on a candle, or the wick is in oil. The oil is in a glass. The glass is resting on a candlestick. Everything beneath the flame is a basis ledavar ha'aser. It is something that is there to support the davar ha'aser. It's a base, basis, base, very similar. It's a base for a davar muktzah, for the flame that's there on top. And you put that flame there with intent, more on that later, but you put that flame there with intent to be on top of this entire construct. So everything beneath that flame is now subservient, it's bottle to that flame. It's all a basis ledavar ha'aser, and because it's a basis ledavar ha'aser, it is muktzah. And migoides katsoy lebein hashmashos, it was muktzah ben hashmashos when Shabbos came in. Huktzah lekule Shabbos kula, it remains muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos, even after the ner, which really is the ultimate dvar muktzah in this entire construct. Even after the flame goes out, everything remains aser. It all remains muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos. Now, you might ask me, okay, so you're telling me that the flame is the dvar muktzah. In reality, a candlestick itself, a silver candlestick, is also muktzah. Why is a candlestick muktzah? Because it's a kli shemalachtai le'isr. It's a utensil that is used for something which is aser on Shabbos. It is a candlestick. What do you use a candlestick for? You put a candle in it, or you put oil on top of it, and you light it. That's something that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. So in reality, a candlestick itself is muktzah on its own, because it's a kli shemalachtai le'isr. But here's the thing. As a kli shemalachtai le'isr, there are ways that you're allowed to make use of the candlestick on Shabbos. If you want to use the candlestick for something which is a mutter purpose on Shabbos, sometimes people might like to put silver candlesticks on the table just to beautify the table. Or maybe you have something else that you want to use the silver candlestick for. So if you have a use for the candlestick, or let's say the candlestick is in the way, somebody put the candlestick on the wrong shelf in the break front, and you need the space that's occupied by the candlestick. So that's tzarich b'kaimai. You need the place that's being occupied by the candlestick. If it's only muktzah as a kli shemalachtai le'isr, you would be allowed to use it. But now that you lit a flame on that candlestick on Erev Shabbos, now it's a much more severe muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos. Now for the entirety of Shabbos, it's not looked upon as a kli shemalachtai le'isr. Instead, it's looked upon as muktzah machmas gufay. It's something which is inherently muktzah, like sticks and stones in the backyard, that you're not allowed to handle on Shabbos, even tzarich gufay, even tzarich b'kaimai. You're not allowed to go out to your backyard on Shabbos afternoon and look, you need something to hold your door open and pick up a rock and use it as a doorstop. Why? Because that rock is muktzah machmas gufay. It's intrinsically muktzah. It was intrinsically muktzah when Shabbos came in Ben Hashmashas. It remains muktzah machmas gufay for the entirety of Shabbos, and you're not allowed to move that rock, even tzarich mekaymai, even tzarich gufay or mekaymai. Same too with the candlesticks that were lit on Erev Shabbos. They are muktzah machmas gufay for the entirety of Shabbos. You're not allowed to handle them at all for the entirety of Shabbos. Not even tzarich gufay, not even tzarich mekaymai. Now, having said that, we see here in the Ramah a very interesting exception to this rule. Says the Ramah, bottom line, Nun Tes Amud Aleph Hagah. V'yesh oimrim, there are those that say, Demishahu istinis, somebody who is highly sensitive, a highly sensitive person. V'haner ma'us alav, and this ner, so they had a lamp, a candlestick of some kind that was lit on Erev Shabbos. Now it's Shabbos morning, and the ner is out already. Now you have this person who's very, very sensitive. V'haner ma'us alav, and there's something about the ner that is repulsive to him. Maybe it's an earthenware ner that gets very grimy, maybe even smelly, and somehow to this sensitive person, having that oil lamp on the table is just repulsive to him. It's a turnoff, and he cannot enjoy his Suda. So v'yeshaimrim demishu istinis, somebody who's very sensitive, v'haner ma'us alav, and therefore this ner is repulsive to him, mutar l'hoitziyai, he's allowed to pick it up and remove it from his place. So after this whole discussion that we've had, that the ner is a basis l'davar ha'asur, and migui dis katsoyle ben hashmoshes is katsoyle kula yuma, it's inherently muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos, and it's such a severe muktzah, you're not even allowed to move it, tzarich gufay, tzarich mekaymai. Now the Ramah says, if it's repulsive to a sensitive person, he's allowed to pick it up and move it. Why? Because to this person, we look at this ner as being similar to a graf shel rei. What's a graf shel rei? Literally, a graf shel rei is a chamber pot. A chamber pot, a urinal, it's a keli that's full of excrement. Now, excrement is certainly muktzah. However, having said that, if you have a graf shel rei on Shabbos, you are allowed to pick it up and remove it. Why? Because it's something which is repulsive, and Chazal will matter you to get it out of the way. Says the Ramah, to a highly sensitive person, a used lamp, which is now out, so really, there's no muktzah here anymore, the flame is gone, a highly sensitive person would be allowed to remove that ner, because it would have a din of a graf shel rei. Turning the page to the Tes Amud Beis, the Ramah ends off, v'hamachmir loy hifsid. Somebody who's machmir and does not remove the ner does not lose out. Now we'll see in the Mishnah Berurah, the Mishnah Berurah changes that text a little bit, but let's turn back to Nun Tes Amud Aleph and see the Mishnah Berurah near the bottom. Mishnah Berurah ois katan hey, istinis. V'habachu magen Avram pasku, the bach and the magen Avram paskin, da'af mi she'enoi istinis, even if a person is not particularly sensitive. Imhu oimer shemos alav, if he looks at the ner and to him it's repulsive, shari l'sal kai me'al shulchan, he's allowed to pick it up and take it off the table. Umashba babach, it's implied by the bach, deloy hekel el bener shel cheres shehu mos bevadai. This kula, says the bach, would only apply to an earthenware oil lamp, because that's known as being something that becomes repulsive. Ukidlakaman b'sivav, v'uadin shel eitz, or a wooden oil lamp. Aval shel matchis, but if it's a metal lamp, loy mois. Nobody looks at a metal candlestick or a metal oil lamp and says that it's mois, and therefore it has to be removed. The Derech Chaim disagrees with the Magen Avram and with the Bach, and the Derech Chaim says that no, this kula of the Ramaz is specific only to an istinus, only to a person who is known to be a sensitive person. Ois Katan Vav, Moas Alav, if the istinus finds the ner to be repulsive to him, what does that mean that it's repulsive to him? Hainu she'ena yachal lizboil, she'yehi munach etzloi, lachish akava. He can't handle it. It doesn't mean, oh, what is that? It means he can't handle it. He can't handle having it there. Or Shabbos during the day. The nair is out and he can't handle it being there. The Ramah said in such a case, it's mutar lahitziai, hainu kishuhu munach bimkaim yeshivasai. What the Ramah means to say is, if this oil lamp that's already extinguished is sitting in the place where the istinus needs to be, so it's by his dining room table, so then, Shari lo yitziyai misham, he's allowed to pick it up and remove it. Avalim hu munach b'makam acher. But if it's sitting someplace where the istinus doesn't need to be, right? So the nair is in the kitchen, and the istinus is by the dining room table. And now the istinus wants to go pick up the used nair and take it out of the kitchen. Why? You're not there anyway. It's not bothering you. Avalim hu munach b'makam acher, gam hu istinus asal l'taltal l'mimakam l'makam l'kulei alma. Everybody agrees that this ner is muktzah because it's a basis l'davar aser. The heter of the Ramah is, if you're an istinus and the used ner is in a place where it's troubling the istinus, then the istinus has a heter to go ahead and move it because it's a graf shalrei. That doesn't mean that if the ner is located anywhere in the house, the istinus could go decide to move it because somehow for him it's not muktzah. No, it's a basis l'davar aser. It's certainly muktzah. Now, the language of the Ramah was v'hamachmir loy hifsid, which means that somebody who rules stringently and is machmir and does not move the ner, even though he's an istinus, he doesn't lose. And he doesn't lose out by being machmir. Says the Mishnah Berurah, we need to tweak this a little bit. Mishnah Berurah is cut ches, v'hamachmir loy hifsid tzarch loymar. What this really should say is v'hamachmir yachmir. Somebody who wants to be machmir could be machmir. But v'hamekel loy hifsid. But if somebody is mekel, he won't lose out. V'hamekel loy hifsid. He won't lose out by being mekel. The point of the Mishnah Berurah obviously is hamachmir loy hifsid doesn't seem to make sense. Why would you lose out by being machmir in this case? It's not a chumrah ha'asi lidei kula, so what's the problem with being machmir? Why would you think that the machmir would be hifsid? What would he lose? By a mekel, you could say v'hamekel loy hifsid. Somebody's afraid to be mekel because he's going to say maybe they can have a tain on me in Shamayim for being mekel. Says the Rambam, you should know over here if you're an istinus and you moved an air, hamekel loy hifsid. No one's going to have a tain on you for doing it. Okay, now we turn to Sif Gimel, top line, Nun Tes Amud Beis. Says the Mechaber. We have learned that the halacha of a basis l'davar ha'aser, when something is serving as a base to a davar ha'aser, to something that's muktzah, then the halacha of basis l'davar ha'aser kicks in, and the basis itself becomes muktzah. However, we learned that if something is a basis l'davar ha'aser, u l'davar ha'muter, l'dvar heter, then it's not necessarily a basis. So in that context, we learned, if you have leichter on a table, so it's possible that the table becomes a basis l'davar ha'aser, and now you're not allowed to move the table. But if you put the chalas for Shabbos on the table, the chalas are very chashuv. You must have them for Shabbos. We look at them as being more chashuv than the shalheves, than the muktzah flame that's perched on top of the neiris, and therefore the table is not a basis l'davar ha'aser. Why? Because again, the underpinning of the whole halacha of basis l'davar ha'aser is that the basis item, the table, the base, becomes bottle. It becomes subservient to the dvar muktzah, and therefore it itself becomes muktzah. But what if the table is acting as a support, not only to a flame, which is a davar ha'aser, it's also serving as a support to the chalas, which are mutter. Now you can't say that the table is butter to the nair. The chalas are more chashuv than the nair. So if anything, it's bottled to the chalas. You want to say it's bottled to the chalas and to the nair, but it's still bottled to the chalas. The chalas aren't muktzah, therefore the table is not muktzah. So there we have the concept of a basis l'davar ha'aser u l'davar ha'muter. Now the Shulchan Aruch tackles a very interesting case. What if somebody wants to turn his candlestick into a basis l'davar ha'aser u'ledavar ha'muter? Like this, the candlestick is a basis l'davar ha'aser. It's supporting the flame. But what if I take a little bread and I put a little bread on top of the candlestick? So now I want to say that it's a basis l'davar ha'aser u'ledavar ha'muter. The Shulchan Aruch is going to tackle that shaila with two slightly different cases. So first, the Mechaber says like this: Letalto ner. If you want to move a ner on Shabbos, al yidei shenoisten alav lechem b'Shabbos. So what you want to do is like this: you come home and your wife says, I wish I could move the neris. The neris are out already. I wish I could move the neris. I would love to make space over here on the table and move the neris. So you come around and he said, wait a second, hold it. I can't move the neris because they're a basis l'davar ha'aser. You know what I'll do? I'll break off a piece of challah. I'll put a piece of challah on top of the ner, and now I'll call it a basis l'davar ha'aser u'ledavar ha'muter. And now I should be able to move it. Says the Shulchan Aruch, obviously that doesn't work. Says the Mechaber, L'taltal ner, you want to move a ner on Shabbos. Al yidei shenoisten alav lechem b'Shabbos. How do you want to do it? You want to put bread on top of the neris on Shabbos. So on Shabbos morning, you want to suddenly turn the candlestick into a basis l'davar ha'aser l'davar ha'muter. Aser, you're not allowed to move it. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, he's cut and test. It should be obvious to everyone what the problem over here is. Mishnah Berurah is cut and test. Aser. Hatam, the reason it's aser is you're putting bread on top of the candlestick when? Shabbos morning. But what happened by Ben Hashmoshes? By Ben Hashmoshes, Friday evening, when Shabbos came in, there was no bread on the candlestick. So at that point, the candlestick was only a basis l'davar ha'aser. Once it was a basis l'davar ha'aser ben hashmoshes, migo dis katzoy ben hashmoshes, is katzoy l'kula yuma. It's too late. You can't turn it into a basis l'davar ha'aser and l'davar ha'muter in middle of Shabbos. Ta'adayin lo yhoyapoi oz lechem. By Ben Hashmoshes, there was no bread on top of the candlestick. Umigo dis katzoy Ben Hashmoshes, is katzoy l'kule yuma. Continues the Mechaber's second line down. How about if we take away that problem? Okay, I'll solve the Mechaber's first problem. I'll tell my wife, when you tzend licht on Erev Shabbos, don't just put the lechem mishnah on the table. Take some bread and perch some bread on top of the candlestick. And then light neris. So now, by Ben Hashmoshes, when Shabbos comes in, the candlestick is a basis l'davar ha'aser, the flame, and l'davar ha'muter, to the bread. So now you took off the problem of mikoy dis katzoy le Ben Hashmoshes, is katzoy l'kula yuma. Would that work? Says the Mechaber, if you put the bread on top of the candlestick Friday afternoon while it was still Erev Shabbos, there are those who say that it would be mutter to move the candlesticks now on Shabbos because of that lechem that turns it into a basis l'davar ha'aser and a davar ha'muter, and the Beragoyla brings this down from the Kolbay and the Rivash. But says the Mechaber, ve'ein lismay chalav. However, you should not rely on this opinion, and this is very, very interesting. Let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Yud Halechem. So first of all, what are you trying to do here? You want to put the bread on top of the candlestick on Erev Shabbos, so that by Ben Hashmoshes already, the candlestick should be a basis l'davar ha'aser l'davar ha'muter. First of all, the Mishnah Berurah reminds us, in order for this to work, the lechem has to be more chashuv than the shalheves. It has to be more chashuv than the muktzah. The muktzah is the shalheves. Now we're going to see a funny lashon here in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah halechem, hainu im halechem hu chashuv etzlo yoser me hashemen. Over here, the Mishnah Berurah says, for some reason, that the lechem has to be more chashuv than the shemen. Maybe it's because by Ben Hashmoshes, there's oil over here also, and the oil is also muktzah. If you want to make the candlestick a basis l'davar ha'aser and a davar muter, the davar muter by Ben Hashmoshes is going to be the lechem. The shemen is not a davar muter, because let's remember, by Ben Hashmoshes you're going to light the ner. As long as the ner is lit, you're not allowed to take out any of the oil, because taking out the oil would be the isser of mechabe. It would be partially extinguishing the flame because you're going to dim the flame when you take the oil out. So by Ben Hashmashos, when you light the neiros, it's not only the flame that's muktzah inherently, the oil is also inherently muktzah. Now the oil is probably more valuable than the flame. Very hard to put a value to the flame. But the oil, the extra virgin olive oil or whatever you're using in there, that has a distinct value. So the lechem that you're trying to put onto the candlestick in order to turn it into a basas l'davar aser and a davar mutter is going to have to be more valuable than the oil. V'huadin, and the same thing applies, says the Mishnah Berurah, if you put something else choshev on top of the candlestick. The other minan, because then we would say, kevan the haner nasa basis le'isser, since the candlestick or the lamp is a basis to the dvar isser, duhu hasheben, uleheter, and to something which is mutter, like the lechem, or whatever else you put there, v'haheter choshev tvei, and the dvar mutter is more valuable than the dvar isser, ulekach shari, k'moshe kasa siman shin yud. So seemingly, this should work. So again, before we go weiter in the Mishnah Berurah, what the Mechaber is suggesting is like this. To try to turn the lamp or the candlestick into a basas l'davar aser and davar mutter on Shabbos itself, that doesn't work. Because it's a problem right when Shabbos comes in. Shabbos comes in Ben Hashmashos. If it's a basas l'davar aser, during Ben Hashmashos, migudis katzoy Ben Hashmashos is katzoy kula yuma. So that doesn't work. Then the Mechaber said, okay, I'll circumvent that problem. I'll turn the candlestick into a basas l'davar aser and davar amuter by Ben Hashmashos. So maybe what your wife will do is she'll take off her diamond ring, she'll perch it on top of the candlestick, and then light the neiros. The diamond ring is certainly worth more than the oil or than the shalheves. So now already it's a basas l'davar aser and l'davar amuter by Ben Hashmashos. So l'chari, you have now circumvented the problem of basas, and now tomorrow morning when the neiros go out, you should be allowed to move the neiros. And that's what the Mechaber says. There is an opinion that holds this way. But then the Mechaber ended off and he said the ein lismeichalav. However, you should not rely on this opinion. Why not? What's the fly in the ointment? The fly in the ointment is very interesting, and the Mishnah Berurah explains it right here. Nevertheless, even though logically, if you do the math, this seems to work. Nevertheless, the Mechaber concludes that you should not rely on this. The reason is, what is this? It's a candlestick. That's what it is. What's a candlestick made for, Rabbi Isai? A candlestick is a kli which is distinctly made to hold a burning candle or a burning oil lamp. That's what it is. That's why it's called a candlestick, right? L'chein nasis tamid tafel ubasis leshalheves v'loy lelechem ushari dvarim acherim af shehem chashuvim yoser. Very interesting svara that the Chavetz Chaim is explaining to us. The Chavetz Chaim is explaining to us over here. You want to turn a table into a basas l'davar aser and l'davar amuter? You could do that. A table is meant to hold a myriad of different objects. So yes, if it's only holding candlesticks, so now it's a basas l'davar aser. If you put the chalas on the table, so now it's a basas l'davar aser, the candlesticks, and l'davar muter, to the lechem mishnah, to the chalas. Fine, that's perfect. But you want to take candlesticks and you want to perch a piece of challah on top, and you want to call it a basas l'davar aser l'davar muter. Rabbi Isai, if you look at the candlesticks and you see a burning candle on top of the candlestick, and you put and there's a piece of bread there, and you ask somebody which one doesn't belong, the answer is the bread. Candlesticks are not meant to hold bread. So to go ahead and say that the candlestick is a basas l'davar amuter because there's a piece of bread perched on top of it, that's not, it's completely inappropriate. It completely doesn't belong there. And especially if there is a candle there, there's no way you're going to tell me that the candlestick is bottle to the bread, even if the bread happens to be more chashuv, right? It's a beautiful sourdough roll, and you have a nice candlestick with a nice big top that somehow you could perch a sourdough bilkala up there. No one is going to turn around and say that the candlestick is bottle to the sourdough bilkala and not to the flame. It's doch a candlestick. That's the svara the Mishnah Berurah says over here, that this is why the Mechaber says you should not rely on this opinion, and he brings it down from the Magen Avraham. Okay, moving along to Sif Daled. Sif Daled needs a little bit of a hakdama. So I need to remind you of something that we learned in Siman Reish Ayin Zayin, Sif Gimel. The truth is that our whole discussion here of the candlestick being a basis, there's really a very strong question that you could ask on it, and it has a direct bearing on what we're going to learn in the next Sif. We learned in Siman Reish Ayin Zayin, Sif Gimel, in the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Yud Ches, Dibur HaMaschil, Midas. The Mishnah Berurah told us of a very yesodistic machloikis. We know that in order for something to become a basis, you have to take the Dvar Osir, the Dvar Isser, the Muktzah object, and you need to put it on the basis with intent. And there has to be intent that it should be there on Shabbos. So a case that I gave you was, I take my cell phone on Erev Shabbos, and I put it into a keli, into a glass bowl that I have on my nightstand that I empty my pockets into. So I took my cell phone, a Dvar Muktzah, and I put it into a keli with intent that it should remain there for Shabbos. I have now created a basis. That glass bowl is now a basis. But if I take my a pen and absent-mindedly on Erev Shabbos, I drop it onto my wife's Bina magazine on Erev Shabbos, the Bina magazine does not become a basis. Why not? Because I didn't put the pen there with intent that it should remain there. I wasn't interested in the Bina magazine becoming a basis. There was no intent here, so it doesn't create a basis. Having said that, the Mishnah Berurah told us of a machlokes. We have, what level of intent do you need? We say that there has to be intent that the muktzah item should remain on the basis item on Shabbos. Does that mean that it has to be there for the entirety of Shabbos? Or does it mean that I have to have had intent that it should remain there for at least some of Shabbos? I had intent that it should be there for the Ben Hashmoshes period, when Shabbos began. Maybe I had intent that it should remain there overnight, but I knew that it was going to be removed Shabbos morning. And the Mishnah Berurah gave us a case that this is applicable to, this question. He gave us a case where this question comes into play. The Chavetz Chaim says that at least in his time, it was the derech that the Shabbos neiros would be put on the table, and the intent was that Shabbos morning the guy is going to come and the guy is going to take them away. So that means that the intent was not that the neiros should stay on the table for the entire Shabbos. The intent was only that they should remain there for part of Shabbos. So this would be a case where this machlokes would come into play. And the Mishnah Berurah over there gave us another case. He said, therefore, because we have this machlokes, there are cases where we could rely on the mekilim. And if there's something that was put there with only intent to be there for part of Shabbos, there are times that we could be makel and we could say that you have not created a basis. Okay, now, let's look at our case of the candlestick. So your wife goes Erev Shabbos and she lights licht. We're saying that the flame is muktzah. Okay, so she puts a flame on top of the candlestick. Is that flame going to stay there for the whole Shabbos? No. The flame's going to go out. If you have 4-hour neronim, they're going to go out in 4 hours. If you have a 6-hour candle, they're going to go out in 6 hours. If you're using oil in a glass, you don't know exactly when it's going to go out. But generally speaking, by the time you wake up Shabbos morning, the neros are out. So why isn't that machlokes that was brought by the Mishnah Berurah, why isn't that applicable to every single case of Neros Shabbos? I lit the neros on Erev Shabbos, and I knew that the neros were going to go out. So doesn't that mean that I put it there with intent that it should only be there for part of Shabbos? And if so, according to the Mekilim, who hold that does not create a basis, so according to them, neros should never be a basis. And yet, we don't see anybody say that. And the truth is that the Bir Halacha in Reish Ayin Zayin tackles this question. He tackles this question. He tackles this question in... Okay, I'm not remembering right now exactly which biur halacha it is. All right, I'll find it. But the biur halacha tackles this question. And the biur halacha gives us two different explanations, two different answers to this question. And I'll give you the simple one. The simple answer to this question is that there's a great difference between putting something on top of a buses with the knowledge and the intent that it is going to be removed on Shabbos, and putting something on top of a buses when it happens to be that it's going to go out. And the difference speaks directly, again, to the underpinnings of the halacha of buses l'davar ha'asur. When you put something on top of a buses with intent that it's going to be removed at some time during Shabbos, there's a svara to say that I did not make the buses item subservient to the muktzah item. If I put it there with the intent that it should remain there for the entirety of Shabbos, so then yes, I was mevatel the buses item, I was mevatel the glass bowl to the cell phone, because I put the cell phone there with das that it should remain there for the whole Shabbos. But if I put the cell phone there only with das that it should remain there for part of Shabbos, then I wasn't really mevatel the glass bowl to the cell phone. I know that at some point the cell phone is coming off the glass bowl, and then maybe I'll have a use for the glass bowl at that time. So maybe it doesn't become a buses. So that's when you didn't have intent that it should remain there for the entirety of Shabbos. That's not the case by a flame on Neiros. By a flame on Neiros, you light it. It happens to be you know that it's going to burn out. But you're not putting it there, al das, that I'm going to remove it. You're lighting it, and now it's out of your hands. You're lighting it. It happens to be that the physical facts on the ground are that eventually it's going to burn out. But once you light it, it's out of your hands. I didn't light it with das that it's going to be removed. I didn't light it with das that I'm going to take it off, or I'm going to have a goy take it off. I lit it, and now what's going to be is going to be. It happens to be that it will go out. That's not the same. Even the Mekilim would hold, says the biur halacha, that when you light the Neiros, when your wife lights the Neiros, Erev Shabbos, before Bein Hashmoshes, she's mevatel the candlesticks to the Neiros completely. They're going to go out, but that's not your das. It's not your das to remove it. And therefore, that makes it different. Now let's turn to Sif Daled, and you'll see how this plays into Sif Daled, 3 lines down Nun Tes Amud Beis. Says the Mechaber. The Mechaber is going to ponder a question like this. How about if you create the buses kind of with a Tanai? In other words, the problem with the buses is that the buses becomes bottled to the Dvar Muktzah Bein Hashmoshes, and now we say Migoy de Iskatsoy Bein Hashmoshes Iskatsoy Kuliyuma. But what if I make it Tanai? What if I light the Neiros and I say to myself, look, I know that the Ner is going to go out. When the Ner goes out, I want to be allowed to move the Neiros. So it's kind of the same question as what we just discussed. But again, it's not I'm putting the Shalheves on the Ner with intent to remove it. You can't remove it. You can't put out a flame on Shabbos. But what it is I'm lighting the Neiros, and I'm telling you right now, I'm making a Tanai. I don't want to be mevatel the candlesticks to the Shalheves for the entirety of Shabbos, because I know that the flame is going to go out. So I want to retain the right to move the candlesticks after the flame goes out. That's what the Mechaber tackles here. Sif Daled says the Mechaber. Im histame Erev Shabbos al ner zeh. If you make a Tanai on Erev Shabbos on the Ner, sheyitaltenu mishayichbeh, that you want to retain the right to move the candlesticks after the flame goes out, mutal shakava. The opinion of the Mechaber is that Tanai works, and now when it goes out, you'll be allowed to move the candlesticks. And again, The svara that underpins this sheet of the Mechaber is that the whole svara of basis l'davar ha'aser is that you're mevatel the basis to the davar ha'aser. But if you make a Tanai, reasons the Mechaber, you are not mevatel it. You had das beferish when you lit the neris that, look, it's only temporary. I know the neris are going to go out. So when the ner goes out, I want to retain the right to move the candlesticks. The Mechaber says that works. Now, having said that, let's see the Mishnah Berurah is cutting it off. In Hisna, Mishum the ner also lihikavos, because we know the ner is going to go out. Mishum hachi mahani be Tanai. That's why a Tanai would work. You see, the Mechaber doesn't ponder this by every single case of a basis. In other words, the Mechaber doesn't say, how about if I put my cell phone into my glass bowl and I put it there with a Tanai? I'll put it there with a Tanai like this. I'm putting the cell phone into the glass bowl. So, l'chayra, I'm creating a basis. I'm being mevatel the glass bowl to the cell phone. Now, I want to make it Tanai. If somehow the cell phone ends up out of the bowl in the middle of Shabbos, I want it to be able to eat cereal out of the bowl. I want to retain my right to move the bowl. So if my little anicle comes on Shabbos afternoon and he takes the cell phone and he takes it out of the bowl, it shouldn't be a muktzah. I should be allowed to use it to eat cereal. Could you make the Mechaber doesn't declare such a tonight in the halachas of basis. He only declares this shaila by the neris. Explains to Mishnah Berurah why. He says the reason why is because you know that the ner is going to go out. You see, the ner is a very funny situation. It's not a case of I put muktzah on something with das that it's only going to be there for part of Shabbos, because you're not going to remove the ner. You have no way to remove the ner. But at the same time, you know that the ner is a temporary condition. You know it's going to go out. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that's why the Mechaber declares the shaila here. Since you know that the ner is going to go out, maybe a Tanai helps, because now you can make an argument that by Ben Hashmoshes, it wasn't at Ben Hashmoshes that I was mevatel this bowl, this candlestick to the shalheves, because I knew it was going to go out, and I said beferish, I made a Tanai. When the flame is no longer there, I want to retain the right to move the candlesticks. Aval b'shar basis l'davar aser, but by any other basis l'davar aser, afledei rishoyin loy mahani Tanai lahasnois kishe yistalek advar iser min abasis sheyeh mutar lehishtamish. But the Magen Avraham says the Mechaber would not have held this by any other kind of basis. It's only by the ner where you know that it's a temporary situation. Now let's turn to the Ramah. Says the Ramah 4 lines down. Haga. But there are those who disagree strongly with this Mechaber and they say such a Tanai does not work. That's the way we are noyig in our Medinos. V'din ha-Tanai ayin l'kamon siman tef reish lamed ches. And for the specifics of how you would make this Tanai, you have to look later on in siman tef reish lamed ches. Let's pause in the words of the Ramah there for a moment, and let's see Ois Katan Yud Beis, where the Mishnah Berurah says, "V'din ha-Tanai ayin l'kamon hainu le'inyan she'aseu kaidem en hashmashas kamavur sham." What the Ramah is telling me over here is that according to the Mechaber, that such a Tanai works, you have to make the Tanai before Ben Hashmoshes. Because once Ben Hashmoshes kicks in, it's too late. Once Ben Hashmoshes comes in, you just got soil Ben Hashmoshes, it's got soil kula yuma. So you would have to make the Tanai before Ben Hashmoshes. Aval hacha eni yachal loimer afilu de rishayna eni boidel me'aner kol Ben Hashmoshes k'may hasam. But this Tanai works differently than the Tanai in Taf Reish Lamed Ches, which is talking about Noi Sukkah. By Noi Sukkah, the Tanai that you have to make, Noi Sukkah decorations are muktzah for the entirety of Sukkahs. Unless when you put them up, you make a Tanai. The way the Tanai by Noi Sukkah works is you have to say, I am not separating myself, any beidel, I'm not separating myself from the Noi Sukkah for the entire Ben Hashmoshes period, and by saying that, I'm circumventing the problem of Bigui dis Katsoyle Ben Hashmoshes is Katsoyle Kula Yuma. That doesn't work over here by Neris. You can't say I'm not separating myself from the candlesticks for Ben Hashmoshes, because during Ben Hashmoshes, the Neris are going to be lit, and forget bosses. the candlesticks are inherently muksa. They have a muksa shalheves perched on top of them. So that's technically not how the Tanai works over here. Now the next phraseology over here in the Mishnah Berurah, I very rarely do this, but the rest of this Mishnah Berurah is beyond the scope of what we do here. I'm not going in to the Shitas Arif. It's beyond the scope of what we do in this shir. Now, so the Ramah said there are those who disagree with this Tanai of the Mechabers. Why do they disagree with the Tanai of the Mechaber? The reason they disagree with the Tanai of the Mechaber is very, very simple. Because what the Mechaber is saying is you could make a Tanai, and you could say, since I know that the flame is going to go out, I want to make a Tanai, and I want to say when the flame goes out, I want to be able to move the candlesticks. But there's a very obvious fly in the ointment. And that is that the bottom line is that during Ben Hashmashos, when Shabbos comes in, when you light the neiros, you are mevatel the candlesticks to the nair. And like we said earlier, you can't say that I'm only putting the nair there for part of Shabbos, because once you put the nair there, it's out of your hands. So you can't say that. So this Shita holds that the Tanai also doesn't work. The bottom line is, when you light the neiros, you mevatel the candlesticks to the neiros. Since you mevatel the candlesticks to the neiros for Ben Hashmashos, you see, when it's something that you could remove, like the Mishnah Berurah's case in Reish Ayin Zayin, where you know that the guy is going to come in Shabbos morning and take the candlesticks off the table, you can argue that Ben Hashmashos, I wasn't mevatel the table to the candlesticks, because I set up already that the guy is going to come in Shabbos morning and take the candlesticks off the table. So even during Ben Hashmashos, you can't tell me Migu just got soila Ben Hashmashos, it's got soila Kula Yuma. Even Ben Hashmashos, the table wasn't really bottled to the candlesticks, because we knew all along that the guy is coming in Shabbos morning and taking the candlesticks off. Can't make that argument over here by the neiros. You can't say, I'm making a Tanai that when they go out, I should be allowed to use it. No, during Ben Hashmashos, the candlesticks are completely bottled to the Shalheves, and therefore it does not work. Okay, we're going a little longer than I hoped, but let's go a little bit weiter over here in the Ramah. Let's at least finish this sif. 5 lines down, end of the line, continues the Ramah. V'noyagin l'taltaloi al yedei eino Yehudi. So again, the Mechaber said that this Tanai works. The Ramah said there are Shitas that say that the Tanai does not work. The Ramah said that we're noyeg, like the Shitas that say that the Tanai does not work. Having said that, the Ramah says, we're noyeg that you are allowed to have a goy move the candlesticks. So you can have an Eina Yehudi move the candlesticks. Ve'ein bazeh mishum iser amira le'eina Yehudi, and there would be no problem of amira la'akum to instruct the Eina Yehudi to move the candlesticks. Hoyel v'haminig kach, because since the minig is that we ask an Eina Yehudi to move the candlesticks, hevi ki'ilu hisna alav b'tchila, it's as if you made the Mechaber's Tanai at the beginning, v'shari, and it's mutter kei nirali, so it seems to be, says the Ramah. Very interesting Ramah. What the Ramah is doing is like this. The Ramah is being mitzaref, he's merging two kulas. What he's doing is he's saying like this. We have the Mechaber's Tanai. Now we're noyig that we don't use the Mechaber's Tanai, but the Mechaber's Tanai is still out there. Since the Mechaber's Tanai is out there, and there are those that paskin that you could use the Mechaber's Tanai, we allow you to ask an Eina Yehudi to move the candlesticks based on the Tanai. What does that mean? Well, there's no amira la'akum if you yourself are allowed to move them. So, according to the Mechaber's Tanai, you yourself are allowed to pick up the candlesticks and move them, right? We're not to use the Tanai, but we could ask an Eina Yehudi to go ahead and move them. Amira la'akum? No, there's no amira la'akum. Because since the minig is that we ask an Eina Yehudi to move the candlesticks, the assumption is it's as if we made a Tanai on Erev Shabbos that the candlesticks shouldn't be muktzah. It's as if we made the Mechaber's Tanai. So it's very interesting. We're able to ask an Eina Yehudi to move the candlesticks based on the Mechaber's Tanai, but we don't move them ourselves because we ourselves don't want to rely on the Mechabris tonight. That's what comes out over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Gimel, L'taltal Yagdei and Yehudi, Hainu afilu im einoi tzarech loy l'tzarech gufay b'kaimai, rak shalo yiganev oy shalo yipased. The chiddush over here that you're allowed to have an Eina Yehudi move them is that you're allowed to ask an Eina Yehudi to move them even if he's not moving them because you need the area occupied by the candlesticks. So you're asking the Eina Yehudi to move them tzarech b'kaimai, or you need the candlesticks for some other mutter purpose, so you're asking him to move it tzarech b'kaimai. No, you're asking him to move it, let's say, to put them away so they shouldn't get stolen. You see, for the other purposes, you're always allowed to ask a guy to move muktzah, which is going to become more obvious as we go further. Ice cut in your dalid, heavy kilo hisna reciter larmar. What the Ramah wants to say over here is to move the candlesticks through the agency of an Eina Yehudi. We allow that because because we're going to rely on the mechaber's kula of the Tanai. Let's say you put some kind of a lantern on the table, and the intent was that it was going to be burning the whole day, like a yahrzeit licht. You put a yahrzeit licht on the table, you know that it's a 24-hour candle, so you know it's going to be burning all Shabbos. And it goes out. Over here, you can't say it's as if I made a Tanai that when it goes out, I should be able to move it. No. You didn't dream it was going to go out. It's a 24-hour candle. It's possible that then you wouldn't even be allowed to ask an Eina Yehudi to move it. Now again, that's only true if you want to ask the Eina Yehudi to move it, to put it away, so it shouldn't get stolen. So you're asking an Eina Yehudi to move the muktzah for the needs of the muktzah item itself. You're doing it to protect the muktzah item. But to ask an Eina Yehudi to move muktzah when you're asking him to do it that we learned earlier is always mutter. We learned that when we discussed the case of asking an Eina Yehudi to carry a lamp. The Ramah said on Nunvav Beis, Reisha Vav Sif Gimel, the Ramah said you're allowed to ask an Eina Yehudi to come with you, let's say, to the shed to get something. You're allowed to ask him to pick up a nair that's already burning, to take it with him, so that you should have light to go together to the backyard. What are you doing? You're asking him to move muktzah. The Mishnah Berurah explained over there that you're allowed to ask the Eina Yehudi to move muktzah because there are ways that you yourself are allowed to move muktzah. How are you yourself allowed to move muktzah? Well, you could move muktzah, let's say, tiltal min atzad. But the truth is that the heter of you moving muktzah, tiltal min atzad, only applies to when you're moving it tzarech mekaimai or tzarech gufay. You're not allowed to move something that's muktzah machmas gufay. You're not allowed to move it even using indirect movement, even using tiltal min atzad, if you're moving it to protect it. That you're not allowed to do. So therefore you're not allowed to ask an Eina Yehudi to do it. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here, realize that if you want to ask the Eina Yehudi to move the muktzah l'tzarech gufay or l'tzarech mekaimai, that you're always allowed to ask an Eina Yehudi to do, because that's something that you yourself would be able to do using tiltal min hatzad. Okay, we're going to stop here. We'll continue with Sif Hey next time. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be banging against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shem should send Yeshua's for force Panasat Sheduchim to those in need. We should be zeichet to see the BS God Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.